Okay, so I am ready as soon as I make this thing go away.
It looks like we are started.
Wonderful. So bear with me while I get this all up. Okay, so you're confirmed we've started, Rochelle?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. I'm going to get going then. And anybody who's here, please pardon the delay. We had some fun technical difficulties on my end. But I'm Ryan Atkinson with SmartEtailing, websites and marketing for bike shops. Many of you attending are likely clients. So no introductions maybe are needed, but thank you so much for your business. And if you're not a client, all the information here will be very relevant to you. But there will be some specifics related to SmartEtailing that I hope you find helpful. And one moment. Okay, so if you walk away with two things today, I'd like you to associate accessibility with inclusion and also understand about minimizing risk. So during COVID-19, there's been a dramatic shift to more commerce happening online, which most of you have experienced either as businesses or consumers. But that also has led to an increase in predatory attorneys examining websites. So this is a type of attorney who historically would walk into a business district and look for physical violations of the ADA, things related to signage, doors, ramps, etc. And then send demand letters or make demands or file suits against small business owners. So small business owners are commonly ill-equipped to respond to legal issues, and so they're easy victims. Well, with more commerce shifting online, then that same kind of drive-by type of claim happens online. Now, whether you've been impacted or you've read about this, you're likely experiencing a whole lot of emotions, from confusion and anger, it is compounded by the fact that this is rooted in the ADA, which is now a 30-year-old law, so it's an old federal law. It involves software code, which is by inherently confusing to the bulk of us, and there's sleazy attorneys involved. So, all of these things combined make it feel just overwhelming and scary. And so our goal here is to reduce confusion to help you make informed choices. This is not going to be a detailed how-to. We're going to stay kind of high level to begin with to make sure you have a foundation for what you're going to be learning around the practical side. And then we'll get right into the practical, both on-site and off-site things that you can do. So first, as I said, accessibility is about inclusion. The whole of society right now is focused on inclusion, in a monumental sort of way. Race, gender, sexual orientation are the common lenses through which we view inclusion, but it's important to note that the disabled community also counts. And so as an industry, as we try to open our arms and invite more people into the sport, especially as society changes and more people are getting on bikes, it's really important that we look at the disabled community as yet another group that we'd like to feel welcome shopping at bike shops. So first, the ADA. This was a law was signed into law in 1990. This is a picture of some of the protests that happened as the disabled community was trying to get raise awareness around their issues. There was a dramatic display during this presentation where wheelchair-bound members of this community got out of their chairs and crawled up the Capitol steps to really show how hard it was for someone with a disability to access the same facilities as able-bodied people. The ultimate law has three key sections. One is around employment discrimination. The other is around public entities, so government offices, public transportation. And the third is relevant to your business, and that's just general public accommodations. So a disabled user has access to the same rights and opportunities as everyone else. So again, it's just all about access. If you've read the comments on Brain articles related to ADA, there is a common and unfortunate refrain from a small member of the IBD community that is, if somebody is blind, can they even ride a bike? And of course, that misses out on the scale of styles of disabilities that impact our potential customers. Related to sighted users in particular, there are many types of disabilities related to sight, and not purely a binary blind or not blind. And many of the people that have issues with sight may need to turn to bicycles as opposed to cars, but especially with what we're going through right now, whereas they may have typically relied on public transportation, that may not be an option for them anymore, but they are able to ride a bike. So it's really important that we keep that in mind, that we're really just trying to give people with disabilities the same rights as everyone else. Now, as I shared earlier, the ADA is 30 years old, and it does not explicitly mention websites, in part because the first website was published in 1991. But it's becoming increasingly interpreted to include websites because so much more of our lives now happens online. So you have your physical store, you have your online store. They're both places of public accommodation, and therefore they're assumed to be covered under the Act. Now, the Act, as we said, it was signed into law a year before the first website. So there is no building code. So, and I use that turn of phrase because that's something that as small business owners you're likely familiar with. If you did a build out, your contractor could refer to a building code. A state inspector could visit your business and tell you whether you meet the code or you don't meet the code. There is no such thing related to ADA and websites. So instead, it is businesses, lawmakers, and attorneys tend to look to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which are published by a not-for-profit World Wide Web Consortium. Now, if you go to their website, it almost looks fake because it's so simple. But it essentially is just a resource for companies like SmartEtailing, businesses like yours, and the other stakeholders I mentioned earlier. And what they do is they outline 4 basic principles of website accessibility. And those principles are that the content needs to be perceivable, information, it has to be able to be understood even with assisted technology. It needs to be operable, meaning that that person can click all of the buttons, click the X's to close pop-up windows. It needs to be understandable, and it needs to be robust. So that's the high level. Under that are 13 guidelines followed by success criteria. So in other words, a guideline has to be testable. And so they provide testing guidelines and then techniques for a content publisher to meet that success criteria. Now, the success criteria is commonly used for website accessibility evaluation tools, of which there are scores of them available. This is one of the most popular, WAVE, and I pull it up for a reason, in that in recent headlines around California, which I'll speak to later, this is the tool that was used by the plaintiff's attorney in order to generate alleged errors and make demands of retailers. This tool, you can use it yourself, put your website in, find other tools, and see what comes back. We'll talk a little bit about the nature of the errors and what to do with them a little later in this presentation. So because it's very timely and probably on many of your minds, let's talk a little bit about what's happening in California. So first, worth noting that in addition to the ADA, which is a federal law, California has a state law as well called the Unruh Civil Rights Act. And the key aspect of this act is that if a defendant faces minimum statutory damages of $4,000 for each violation of the ADA, that makes it very attractive for a particular type of attorney who can send a demand letter to a small business owner or any business, count what are generated as alleged errors on one of these evaluation tools, assume it's a true violation, put a $4,000 mandatory statutory damages on each claim, and then generate a 5 or 6-figure number to include in a demand letter to scare small business owners. So that's why, when you take the Unruh Civil Rights Act into play, this is why 42% of all ADA litigation nationwide happens in California. Now, California may be the primary state where this type of claim occurs. It is followed by New York, Florida, and Pennsylvania in terms of number of ADA on website claims. So those states in particular are higher risk because of state laws, but ultimately at the federal level, everybody attending this call is their websites have the expectation that they will be accessible. Now, what happened in the California case? So first, a single plaintiff's attorney with a history of making these types of claims generated some form letter demand letters where seemingly they used the wave tool in order to identify potential errors on some key pages, count up those errors and send them in a hyperbolic letter to small business owners, making it seem like they had no choice and they would be paying tens of thousands of dollars to the litigant. These demand letters are designed to scare small business owners, not just in this case, but just generally speaking. Many of you have had dealings with attorneys before. Some are excellent. But even if they're an excellent attorney, they know how to use the written word in order to achieve an objective. And that's really what these demand letters are. They are not lawsuits. They threaten lawsuits and they give a timeline on when they will file. There, of course, this isn't a legal document. This is simply similar to what in marketing we would call a call to action is respond. And it's for a limited time, so it creates a sense of urgency. As I said, this is a single firm and litigant, and most retailers that we've heard feedback from are disputing the letters, not in court, but instead just in an exchange of letters from their attorney to the attorney who sent the letters. And I've spoken personally with one of the partners at the primary firm representing SmartEtailing clients, and there's a generally positive outlook. So it's not to say that there's not going to be costs for retailers in securing legal counsel, but so far it is looking unlikely that there will be any settlements or any legal cases. But of course, these things are outside of our control, and so it may take another turn. But as of right now, the crisis faced by many of these retailers has downgraded slightly. And I don't want to minimize it, but especially in those early weeks, it was a scary time for many dealers. So when these letters started coming in, how did we respond? So first, we emailed all California retailers about the potential threat. In hindsight, whereas many attorneys are excellent at crafting text, in this case, we were not. And in the letters we sent out, whereas they were intended to be helpful, we ended up scaring a lot of retailers and seeming unaccountable by speaking about the liability that retailers face. So a good example of where a good customer service can, or the attempt at good customer service can yield the wrong results. We made a course correction, especially with retailers who were impacted, and we took a very proactive approach at assisting all impacted clients. We resolved any technical tasks that were required in order to adequately respond to these demand letters that issues have been resolved. And we provided a fact sheet to these retailers to try and demystify what they were seeing in these very lengthy letters that they received. And we also reached out to a number of law firms and whittled down to 2 that we felt would be capable and partners for our clients. Whereas we could not recommend or secure that firm, we couldn't refer. We could provide those lists, and a number of our clients worked together, basically self-organizing, to contact a single firm, which can then bring some economies of scale and make sure that dealers did not feel alone in this process. The demand letters did include some errors that were at the platform level. Just a small indicator of what that might be is for a multi-store location, when a consumer clicks a the button to find which store has a product in stock, that resulting pop-up or modal has a small X that a user with a fully able user knows that they can click that X in order to make the box go away. That was missing what's called an ARIA label. Or the checkout process, all of the form fields were properly labeled, except for the email field. Somehow that was missed in our process. So anything that came up that was at the platform level, we applied what's called a hot fix and resolved it immediately. I'll talk in the next slide about what we've done to date, but we're not going to settle for that. It's clear that our clients count on us to try and resolve as many of these potential risk points for them as possible, and we definitely take responsibility for that. So we are engaging with a third-party auditing firm. It's a relatively sizable investment, but we feel that the return in setting our clients' minds at ease and reducing risk is well worth it. And so we should have results from that within the next 90 days, in which case we expect to resolve some more technology tickets in order to help further reduce risk. But before this point, I would say that we've been aware of accessibility issues and have been focused on it, especially around color contrast, for a number of years. So all of our custom websites and our marketing team was very focused on accessibility. But last fall, when Bicycle Retailer published an article about one of the Haro brands being hit by an ADA suit, it alarmed our leadership team and it alarmed a number of our clients. And so we undertook a wholesale audit of our application and ended up completing over 100 hours of software development on resolving any accessibility issues for the platform. We also engaged our content team to go through the entire cycling catalog, over 60,000 individual items, identify any compliance issues, and resolve those as well. We trained our key staff earlier in this year in order to, if we were managing websites, to make sure that we manage them in compliance. And then we've also now trained key staff on being reactive to, if a retailer receives a demand letter, how do we rapidly resolve any issues? And then to help you more directly, we've created a help center around ADA maintenance, also written a few blog posts on the topic if you want a little more background, but a lot of that information will be covered in this webinar. We've conducted over 300 site audits, resolving errors proactively. These are primarily clients who provide to one of our maintenance services. So earlier this year, or at the start of this year, we added accessibility maintenance to the list of services we provide with our maintenance packages. This does not guarantee that you will not receive a demand letter, but it is a way of making sure that it's one less thing for you to have to maybe directly manage yourself, and instead can delegate some of that work to us. So moving on, this is the topic that triggered a poor response to our email to retailers. And it's important to note that whereas SmartEtailing is an accountable and trusted partner who genuinely cares about your business, in this situation, your business is ultimately responsible for online content. Whether you built your own About Us page or it's a catalog item on your website, it's your website property, and therefore, you may be the subject of one of these demand letters, and ultimately could be subject to consequences if something did go to court. Demand letters in and of themselves, whereas it's not a lawsuit, they can cause hardship. First, emotional. This has been a very hard year, but honestly, running a bike shop is always hard. And when you're not used to dealing with this sort of thing, so there's a lot of mental anguish associated with this being threatened by somebody who is wanting to take advantage of your business. And then any unplanned costs, whether it's a modest retainer of an attorney, or settlement costs. Those are real. Now, this is one of many risks for your business. You are in the business of kind of accepting risk or undertaking risk. You've taken financial risk to start your business. Every time you hire an employee, there's risk. When you fire an employee, there's risk. You every day attempt to minimize risk for your business. This is another thing to add to your checklist, which should warrant attention, but should not be a panic situation at this point. So it's all about having a strategy to minimize that risk. And so let's go onto a website and talk about how you might do that. So first, the things that you have the most control over and the things that you're most actively engaged in on your website would be creating and maintaining content. So you have an upcoming sale, you're adding a new service for your business, and you're adding a page, or you're updating your homepage with some messages around fall apparel, for example. We're going to go over 5 key things to make note, and all of these are discussed in the Help Center. 4 of these are basic maintenance, and the last one, the accessibility statement, is something that is kind of a check the box kind of task for you. So first on headings. So what headings are is these are they're a code on every web page that communicate the organization of the page content. So browsers and plugins and assistive technology can use them to provide navigation on the page. So this is just a visualization that shows you basically what that means. So an H1 header is considered the primary type, the primary on the page. The assumption to a user, both visually, who's engaging with your content, but also web tools like the Google site crawler that helps inform organic search results, but also assistive technologies that disabled persons may use on your website. It organizes the content where H2 is nested under H1, H3 under H2, so on and so forth. You can do this very easily on a SmartEtailing website. When you're editing content using our page builder tool, you can highlight any text. It's in most cases, it's going to default to paragraph text, which is what that funny little symbol is in the upper left under normal. Many of the sections that you create will have pre-designed headers as placeholders to assist you in this process. But if you create your own section and you need to convert text to a header, simply highlight the text, click this button, and select the appropriate header. The side benefit is you have styles associated with these headers that you set up in your display settings for the theme editor. And so you'll make your page look good, it'll perform better in search, and it will meet accessibility requirements. So it's really a win-win-win for you. The next most common, both maintenance need, but also occurrence in most recent demand letters is alternative text, which is written text associated with an image that describes the information or function represented. So this ensures that images can be used by people with disabilities. So many of you who've maintained a website are familiar with these basics. I'm going to show you, so in this slide, this shows you, kind of within the SmartEtailing catalog, this is a specialized bike. And what you're seeing here is using a tool to inspect the code of the website, and circled in pink on the right-hand side is the code behind this image. So it says, where is the image, which is the source. And then that alt tag that you see at the end of the third line in the outline section is followed in parentheses by the title of the bike or the name of the bike. This has many, many benefits for your business, but what this does is it shows that the tens of thousands of pages that could potentially be on your website for product from SmartEtailing, this alternative text is taken care of at the platform level. Now, when you're adding your own content and you upload an image, you'll be presented with this little pop-up drawer when you highlight the image. And on the very far right, you'll see that little I, which says information, and it adds alternative text. When you click that button, it allows you to key this in. So for anybody of a similar generation to me, you might put Cobra Commander in this text. And sorry, it was entertaining myself with this image. Next is contrast. So this is primarily viewed in terms of color, but this is the goal is to provide enough contrast between text and its background, whether that background is white text on a color background, color text on a white background, or text over an image, but that it can be read by people with moderately low vision. So this is really one of the most common misconceptions that you see in things like those brain comments, where being sighted or unsighted is viewed as a binary situation, and that is just not true. The majority of Americans with vision issues have an impairment, not a complete lack of sight. This example shows kind of the subtle nuance here. So view this as three columns, with on the top row is the before and the bottom row is after. So staying at the left, you can see that white text against a blue background for a fully sighted user may seem perfectly legible. But what this contrast ratio is showing is the contrast between the white text and the blue background is a roughly a 4-to-1 ratio. In order to be fully compliant, it needs to be a 4.5-to-1 ratio. So by simply adjusting the blue background, increase the contrast ratio to nearly 7-to-1, making it very comfortable to pass. And you can see that play out with the other columns here. The way this mostly impacts dealers like yourself is if your brand color, your red, with white text over it, if it doesn't generate a sufficient contrast ratio. If it doesn't, in most cases, you can make a mild adjustment to your brand color, darkening it up slightly in order to still be appropriate for your brand, but your brand wasn't necessarily designed with accessibility in mind. So purely using your brand may not serve your business needs in terms of minimizing risk. So it may be worthwhile to, in certain cases in your website, adjust the color slightly, which does not mean that you need to go and replace the signage in front of your store. A little bit of variation online is just fine if it makes your business more accessible. Now, all you have to do is Google color contrast checker, and there are scores of tools to do this as well. This Web Accessibility in Mind Institute is the same organization behind that Wave tool that I showed you earlier. This helps you enter in your foreground color, say white text, over the background color, your brand color, and it'll generate a contrast ratio for you. And you can make adjustments in order to your brand color in order to meet the ratio, and then simply copy that, what's called the hex code, which is the pound sign followed by 6 alphanumeric characters. And then you can use that in your theme editor on a SmartEtailing website in order to replace your brand color with this slightly revised color to meet the contrast requirements. This is an example of the other case where you'll commonly see an alleged error for one of these evaluation tools. And this is a good point or time to pause and talk about what are these errors. So these tools that are used to audit websites understand the success criteria as outlined by the WCAG guidelines or recommendations. But what the software does is it determines that there is text that is sitting on a layer above an image. But the software isn't smart enough to actually look at the image. In most cases, the software is not smart enough in order to understand the image and understand whether a visually impaired person can determine what the text says. So what the tool is designed to do is show you an error so that a human then goes and evaluates the element to determine whether it's legible or not. So this is a good example because, first, on all of the SmartEtailing components that have text over an image, we add a slight, what's called drop shadow to the text. So that's where you see kind of a dark glow that looks like it's sitting behind the text, or it's designed to give it some depth to the text. We include that by default because it helps prevent contrast issues. But even with that there, with the image cropped how it is, this text is largely readable by most users. You can see that middle line, like make or break, for example, is against some white buildings. That could be considered problematic, but let's call that borderline. Everything else is very, very legible against the colored background. But if you imagine if this image was cropped differently, and it was cropped so that it was basically at the handlebars on up, it would expose more skyline. That skyline underneath the text may make it harder for a user to be able to read the text. So you can see there's a little bit of nuance to this process, but it does require a human to review it. And so that's why if you receive a contrast error from one of those free tools associated with an element like this, understand that the existence of a claimed error is not the same as an actual issue, but it does warrant you taking a look to make sure that the background behind your text doesn't make it hard for a user to read the content. Related to creating graphics on your website, you want to avoid text in images. So this is text that's designed into an image and then uploaded to your website. And that text cannot be read by people with moderately low vision. So let me show you some examples of that. So this is kind of Web 1.0 style design. And this is where you may open, or someone on your team may open kind of a design software, from Photoshop on down to a more free tool like Pixlr. And you've got an upcoming sale. So they design a graphic in that separate software, save it as a JPEG or a PNG or a GIF, and then upload that graphic to their website. Now, in some cases, like the demo bike sale, there's not a whole lot of text in that image. So appropriate use of alternative text, like we shared earlier, would likely make this meet the requirements of accessibility. But if you look at these other examples, especially the American mattress, look at the amount of details that are in there around the specials. Alt text wouldn't meet that requirement. So meaning that a non-fully sighted user wouldn't be able to appreciate the level of savings they might have at the promotion. And so they don't have the same access to accommodations as a fully sighted user would. So generally speaking, be very careful about adding text to your images and then uploading. you're much better off to use layering, as we showed in that previous example, for a couple of reasons. A, accessibility, but also B, responsiveness. So imagine that Labor Day sale graphic loaded onto a desktop with a very wide screen, and then you pull that same web page up on your mobile phone, and that graphic is shrunk down to 2 inches wide in your hand. You may really struggle reading, especially that underneath labor or super sale, you'll see save 50 to 75%. You probably won't be able to read that on your mobile device. So generally avoiding this practice will help give your website a more modern feel, help you achieve your goals better, and help you stay in compliance. The last thing we're going to talk about in terms of on-site maintenance is an accessibility statement. So this one is you do it once, and unless standards change, you really don't need to revisit it. But you show users that you care about and are committed to accessibility, and you provide contact information. So in SmartEtailing, we have a library page. So you can just go to your page editor, click on library and search for accessibility, and you'll be able to import a page that has this content in it onto your website, and then you can add a link to it in the footer of your website, much like your privacy policy. But you'll see accessibility statements that are much longer than this, that provide much more detailed information than this. But essentially what you're doing is you're expressing that you do care, what level you're striving to, expressing your commitment to continually review and improve. And if somebody has difficulty accessing, you provide clear contact information for them. The statement that we include in the library meets the basic requirements. Some of the enhancements that dealers might or businesses may add to this will be putting the direct contact information on this page instead of requiring the user to click here, contact us. The trouble with that is it can sometimes be difficult to remember where do you maintain all of your addresses and contact information. Or if you include a particular person's email address and that person leaves in 3 years, the page becomes less durable. And then some attorneys will recommend that you actually have a toll-free number on this page that is staffed 24/7 with people available to answer questions. That is probably going above and beyond, and if you feel like your risk levels are high or your attorney strongly recommends, then that is something that you certainly can pursue, but not something that we at SmartEtailing consider mandatory at this point. So as I already shared, the added benefit of accessibility is that if you follow the best practices, they also help with SEO. So structured information on a page through headers, alternative text on images, improving contrast, avoiding text and images. These are all things that will help your business be found more easily. Now, if you attended last week's webinar by the MBDA, you learned about one of the extra tools available to you. And that the accessibility is a very popular option in what's called an accessibility layer. The other user way is another that comes highly recommended to us. And both are in the process of being fully vetted and will be listed on our integrations page on smartetailing.com. But we so far have already checked to make sure that the JavaScript that gets installed does not cause any problems on your SmartEtailing website. So whereas we're still vetting some of the integrations listing process, if you were to choose to take action right away, you can install these on your SmartEtailing yourself or with the help of our support team, and that should achieve their stated objectives there. And so what does that look like? What will happen is on a website, you'll see a little icon that indicates that there is assistive technology on the website, and a user can enable that, and then the different tools provide different functionality in order to assist users interacting with the website. Now, there's the use of these tools is not black and white. We do feel that as a business owner, if you want to take as many steps as possible in order to limit your risk, then adding an accessibility layer can assist you in that. in a couple of ways. One is it can provide a safety valve for users if, say, a step was missed by a member of your team who uploaded a graphic. Second, it can deter attorneys from wanting to send a demand letter to your business because it's a clear expression that you've taken a look at this issue and you're not going to be as scared by the attorney as somebody who hasn't shown a commitment to accessibility. And third, if you do receive a demand letter, the fact that you had an accessibility layer installed could assist with your dispute or defense if that were required. It is worth noting that installing these tools can lead to complacency in the sense that if a business owner will walk away and say, I'm 100% protected because I pay this monthly subscription, that exposes you to risk. And the majority of these tools can cause issues for disabled users who have their own assistive technology. That is not universal. This technology is advancing very quickly, but if you were to look and research accessibility layers, you'll see that there's really a great debate happening in the business and technology communities around whether or not these are a net benefit or not. You as a business owner can make your own choices. We're here to assist you if you choose to go down the path of adding an accessibility layer. There's also the question of insurance. And so many thanks to Scott at Marsh & McClellan, who many of you know as the insurance guy in the bike industry, fantastic person. When he saw this issue popping up, many retailers contacted him to better understand their coverage. Scott has published an article on ADA compliance. A key takeaway for you is that your general business liability coverage likely does not cover you in this type of a case. But if you do add an employment practices liability policy with a third-party wrongful acts extension, then you may be covered in this scenario. So you're very used to considering risk when it comes to insurance. You decide how much coverage you want, and measure is the ongoing cost of buying that coverage worth the potential savings if you're exposed to some unplanned costs. The exact same thing applies to whether or not you want to pursue an employment practices liability policy. And I do suggest that you start your conversation with Scott. He understands the bike industry. He understands bike dealers. He's just an exceptional resource. So that is an option for you. And then lastly, legal. So what one of the eye openers for me in this process was that most of our customers did not have an attorney available to them. An attorney, or what I recommend for any bike shop owner, is you have the contact information and you've met with an attorney. It is helpful to know that you've got somebody that you can call if something comes up. And it's not just for this type of a case. If you're drawing up any contracts, if you face any employment issues, such as wrongful termination cases, just generally being able to understand your liabilities and then responding to threats like this. Having a phone number, having a name of somebody that you trust is what you need in this scenario. It is a misconception to think that you need an attorney who understands ADA on websites. That is helpful, but the first line of response for any small business owner should be understand the risk from somebody who's informed. So simply having an attorney read a letter, they can give you good context for best case scenario to worst case scenario and likely scenario. And that way, at that first wave, when you're most alarmed, you can have somebody you trust help you decide how do you respond to this other attorney who's making a threat against your business. If it progresses, your attorney may recommend you speak with somebody who has more experience in this area. But from what I understand at this point, the nature of defending these demand letters does not require a specific knowledge because it is simply a back and forth with between attorneys on who are disputing unreasonable claims. So what's the long-term picture look like for your business? If right now we know that the ADA is presumed to apply to your website, but there is no set national guideline for it. Some states are more reliable than others. How do you as a business owner navigate this? We talked about some of that, but is this going to be a forever thing? We don't know. There are three likely scenarios that may play out. So one, and there's growing momentum behind this, that Congress may decide to enact more precise standards. So the intention of the ADA was to build bridges between the disabled community and the business community. The business community has made their voices heard that these ADA claims on websites and the ambiguity around them is very problematic for running a business. There's just too much uncertainty. So Congress is considering legislation that more specifically outlines so that you have a clear playbook and you know what you're defending against if an attorney makes a claim. The Department of Justice may give clarification, so they can issue guidances in this area, and there have been some small steps already taken, but that is also an option. And then what is currently playing out is states may continue to address concerns. So if you live in a state or you operate your business in a state that has a more pro-business environment, there may already be some state level laws that make it prohibitive for predatory attorneys to take advantage of your business in this way. So that's an area where doing some independent research on your state or talking with an attorney who maybe is more capable of doing some of that research on a more detailed level could be a good first step for you, just in terms of understanding your risks so you can take steps to minimize it. So really key takeaways here are making your website accessible, makes your business more inclusive to a wider group of people and helps you minimize risk. And then, as I've shared, doing the work here can have additional marketing benefits for your business in terms of how you rank in search. If you're a SmartEtailing client, simply go to our health center and type in ADA or accessibility in the search bar, and we maintain a very simple ADA compliance on your website page that covers each of the kind of four key areas, five, including the accessibility statement that I covered here, with some very practical, simple how-to information. And this is a live page, meaning we will edit it over time as the situation changes or it becomes clear that our clients have questions that are unanswered. That's it for the presentation portion here. So Rochelle, I can stop screen sharing and we can talk about or answer any questions.
Perfect. We had a question come through in the beginning. You did answer it, but just in case there's something else you wanted to talk about with it. We got a question saying, we are a SmartEtailing client. Do you suggest adding third-party plugins like UserWay or Accessibility, or is SmartEtailing standard interface inclusive and safe for compliance?
Yeah. So simple answer is it's your choice. Do you feel that those possible benefits I listed are right for you? I'll tell you that our primary focus is on the root cause. We want to focus on making sure that the platform and the content you put on the platform are accessible, matching the intent of the WCAG guidelines. There is room for things to get missed or mistakes to happen, and so you may have another layer of protection if you added one.
All right, great. I don't see any more questions coming through. We can give them just a second. But if anybody does have questions, can they contact you or SmartEtailing?
Yes, absolutely. You can reach out to me anytime. It's just ryan.a@smartetailing.com. For the fastest and best informed response, it's easiest just to email support@smartetailing.com for more direct kind of tactical questions. But especially if you want to talk about kind of more broadly in business strategy, find me anytime.
Great. All right. No more questions coming through. So I will say thank you, everybody, for being with us. Thank you, Ryan, for doing this with us. We really appreciate you coming on and giving us a very detailed presentation like you did. So thank you. And go to nbda.com and join if you are not already a member.
Wonderful.
Thanks so much.
Thank you all.